Good morning, party people. How's it going? Leo likes my shoes and slippers. I have UGG slippers, UGG house slippers. I'm not the kind of person who wears UGG boots or anything fancy pants like that. But Aaron Stellato clued me into those. We were talking about sandals out or slippers out on Twitter one morning. And Aaron was like, you totally have to get UGG house shoes or UGG slippers. I'm like, wow, really? And sure enough, they're just fantastic. They're super comfortable. I tend to, I do the standing desk thing, so I walk around all over the sunny, walk around all over the place. And so I wear through them like once a year because the padding just wears out inside the shoes, but the soles are fine. But thunderstorms in Michigan, woof! It's funny out here in Southern California. I forget what real weather is like. My wife and I were just talking about that the other day, and we forget that there are real actual thunderstorms in other places, which now, right now, is the reason why we started talking about it was the hurricane heading for South Florida. I want to say Isaiah is the name of it, or I forget what it is. It was something that was just a little bit odd. But always very keenly aware of that. Fun story, when my wife was going to become an air traffic controller, she had to go to college for that. And so there were, I think, 4 colleges in the U.S. that had spots available quickly to get in and get the degree. And out of the 4, we were torn between a couple of different cities because a lot of them were cities I was like, I don't really want to go there and live there. But one of them was Miami. And my wife, Erica, was like, I don't know that I really want to go to Miami because there are hurricanes come through all the time. And I'm like, look, let's look at the Wikipedia. And according to the averages, a hurricane hits Miami every 2 to 3 years. We're only going to be there for 2 years, so odds are we're probably going to be okay. We're probably only going to see 1 at most, maybe, if worst case scenario, 2. We had 3 hurricanes the first year. 3 hurricanes the first year rolled through there, including one of them, Wilma. We had no power in most of Miami and South Florida for 2-3 weeks. It was terrible. Yeah, so I was watching the weather this morning. Looks like y'all are already getting hit with thunderstorm bands already out there. So I'm like, go. So this morning, what do I want to go do? So this is it's really funny. Sometimes I know long in advance what I'm going to do with y'all. Sometimes I decide in the 5 minutes leading up to it. This is one of those where I decided in the 5 minutes leading up to it. Yeah, there's so many tough years out there. So what I've been looking at lately is SQL Constant Care. So with SQL Constant Care, you install an app on your servers and you send us data once a day, and then Richie's diabolical mastermind Postgres functions analyze your SQL server and tell you what you should do. So I recently published a blog post that says, what have we been finding lately in SQL Constant Care? What is it that y'all are, and I don't want to say struggling the most with, but things that pop up the most often? Because if something pops up a whole lot, I totally haven't watched F1 in so long now. And good morning, Jim, by the way, too, as well. So the things that pop up a whole lot, I want to make sure that we have really good explanation coverage for those particular things. I was too, actually. I was in Katrina at the same time. A friend of mine from New Orleans lost their homes due to the flooding, and we had them come live with us for, 6 months or something. So let's look at that. So here's the blog post. So I got this blog post, what SQL Constant Care has been finding in your servers lately. And if I scroll down there, I had them categorized, which was, I think, really Richie's idea. Has already trained. I saw the pictures of her training in the garage. I was like, that's pretty cool. Yes, I've been to Isle of Man a couple of times. Absolutely, or a few times now, I guess. Absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite places on earth. Oh, my shirt is going all fuzzy. Hang on a second. Let me fix that real quick. So cancel filters, just so that I don't look like some kind of, I was going to say some kind of witch, but I probably still look like some kind of witch. Anyway, yeah, that's a little better. So we categorize these, and if I come down, here are the top 10 overall. So the top 10 things that we've been finding on your SQL servers recently, I'll let you go scan through that list. And I want to cover all of the, oh, that's why I changed the filter this morning. Let me go fix that so that I am a little bit fuzzy because it's doing a little wonky thing there on the green screen. Evidently the chroma key filter doesn't quite like my tourist trophy shirt. So let's change that just a little bit up to there and see if that does it. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so if when I want to have good test, or I almost said test coverage. That's how much I hang around Richie. I want to have good blog post coverage across these issues so that I can start to point people to a landing page for this particular issue and tell them everything that they know in order to get up to speed. Number one, updates available. I don't know that I want to go blog about that today. I got to get in the right frame of mind to explain to people my thoughts on patching. But number two, roughly a quarter of the servers, a third to a quarter of the servers out there are having problems with queries with non-SARGable predicates. And so what does that mean? And the number three one I really struggle with. I'm trying to just, I really want to tell people, hey, go turn on Query Store. These are, keep in mind, this is only the people who've already patched their 2016, 2017, and 2019 instances to the points where they could actually turn on Query Store without having it crash the server. It's just only them. And I still can't get people to install the damn thing. It's tough. Although on the flip side, you're probably thinking, well, Brent, you monitor like 3,000-4,000 servers. That means that the other 2,000-3,000 servers all have Query Store installed, right? No, because a lot of them, most of them are 2012 or prior, 2014 or prior versions that aren't even eligible for Query Store. So no. Plus a lot of them haven't patched because of course, number one up there. So number two, queries may have non-SARGable predicates. So do I have good test coverage? Do I have good coverage on the site about that particular post topic? So I did a search for SARGability on brentozar.com, and I kind of glanced through, and I don't know that I really have great explanations on here about what these mean. I did write this last year when I started noticing the problem that people were having with SARGability. Dave, yes, absolutely. So if I scroll down, my name's Brent, but I do appreciate that kind of thing. So if you scroll down, I talk about what a SARGable query looks like, what a non-SARGable query looks like, and then how you can fix it. You can either change the query so that it's now SARGable, or you can change the data on disk so that you can start getting SARGability. Now, I liked this post a lot, and I might have even done this on a live stream. I like this post a lot. However, it doesn't really cover all the different ways that a query can be non-SARGable. So what I want to do in this next blog post is I want to write a blog post about what are the kinds of queries that get warnings about non-SARGable predicates. Joris is absolutely right, because this leads to my next thing. Richie's absolutely right, because this leads to my next thing. How do you title a blog post? So when I'm writing a blog post, there are really like two kinds of blog posts, and I've talked about this sometimes on the Stratch or on this thing. Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad. I've talked about this a couple times on the stream. I've said one kind of blog post is when you're trying to find, when you have people who are Googling and they are Googling for a specific problem. You can see it's kind of nasty out there in San Diego today. It's all fog. They're Googling trying to find an answer to a question, in which point you phrase the blog post kind of in the title of the question that they're looking for, and you give them the answer inside the post. Other ones are for people who are your regular readers, and they're just going to read the article, or you're going to link them directly to it via tools like SP Blitz, SQL Constant Care, or whatever. Now, I've tried to go the general, what is SARGability kind of thing, because most people don't know to search for that. Most people don't know what that word means. I think I've got a couple other posts or two that I can explain what is SARGability, but I'm going to try to construct those together inside the post to say, yeah, that's true. Construct those together inside the post, say, if you don't know what SARGability means, go over here and you can learn more about it. This one's going to be a blog post where I expect to link people directly to it, so I'm not trying to write for Google in this one. So what do I need to teach them? So what I want to do in this post is I'm assuming that people are getting the warning about non-sargable predicates, and I'm going to give them the ones that I run across the most often that are non-sargable. So what I'm probably going to do for a title is something like 5 common errors that trigger non-sargable predicates. So let's go see. So let's go pop over. My favorite table to use for demos is the users table over at Stack Overflow, the one that I use for how to think like the engine. Just keeps things nice and simple. And I'm going to use the big Stack Overflow database for this one. I'm going to start by dropping all my indexes, and then I'm going to create an index DBO. Create an index, what do I want to do? Location on DBO users, location. And then I'm going to go say select top 100 location, count star as Rex, from DBO users, group by location, order by count star descending, so that I can go see what my top locations look like. And this will start to explain some of the problem that we have around sargability. At the Stack Overflow, location is a free text field. People can type in whatever they want. At your mom's house, inside the closet. You know, they can put in anything that they want, and there's no real validation against it. These days, Stack Overflow's kind of got like a GUI where it'll try to validate your location or suggest to you that you should put in city, region, and country. But as you can see in here, there are a huge number of people who don't put in a location at all. There are a huge number of people who put in just an empty space. And then there are people who do sometimes the country, sometimes like the city and province or region, and then the country. Sometimes they nail that down. Sometimes they just put this. So you can start to see even USA and United States from graveyard. Yeah, exactly. So you can have locations that kind of mean the same sort of thing. United States or USA, for example. So this is the kind of thing that people will do. The kind of thing reminds me of all the good Dave Chappelle jokes about R. Kelly. It was so good. So I'm going to show this in the blog post. I'm going to say, okay, so here's the problem that I'm up against. This is a free text field, so people can put in whatever they want. Even though I have an index on location, the way that people are going to usually write their queries is they're going to say things like select star from DBO users where location is like United States. And then, of course, we saw that there's also USA inside there, so we're also going to say, or location like USA, just to say, which isn't really completely correct either, but let's go see what that gets us. Now, let's see how many come back from that, because there may be an absolute ton. Okay, so there are 254,000. So there are 254,000 here. That means that that's not very good for a blog post. The reason why is that even if this was sargable, even if I could seek directly into this, with 254,000 rows in my result set, odds are I would do a table scan instead of an index seek plus key lookup. So I'm going to add something else in as a filter. I'm going to say, for example, where name like Alex. So let's do, let's put this in here. And I'm going to type this around a little, and display name like Alex. And then let's also create an index on display name, just to say create index display name on DBO users display name. And then execute. Let's go back and try our query again. Welcome to the club, Fanindra. All right, so let's try that now. So now I'm specifically looking for the Alexes that live in the United States of America, and I'm also not getting my execution plan. So this is much better in that this query only produces less rows. This query produces less than like 2,000 rows, which makes it pretty likely that I would get an index seek plus key lookup if SQL Server was willing to use the index. So here, this is making my demo a little bit more complicated again. SQL Server is using the combination of 2 different indexes in order to make this work. It's seeking in for Alex, but then it's just scanning the whole entire one for India. One of the things that I take a whole lot of pride in, that I work really hard to do, is I want to make demos as simple as possible in order to explain clear terms. So what this ends up meaning is that as I'm building demos, often I have to shift gears, back the truck up, and take a totally different approach towards conquering that mountain. This is one of those where I don't think I'm going to get an easy route on the location column, because there are so many people who match, say, the United States. I'm probably not going to be able to match the United States, because people are going to get confused about the difference between hitting the tipping point and doing table scans versus the concept of SARGability. So I need to pick a smaller country. I need to pick a country where less people live, and SQL Server still ends up scanning the whole table because it can't find the people who match. So let's try a different one. Let's go find the top locations again. Let's go get the top locations. And then let's see if there's something where I think there might be a whole lot less people. So we figured out that people with United States anywhere in it, there's a heck of a lot. Let's try Netherlands. Let's try Netherlands, because that's, Mas, well, because you said it. Let's try Argentina. Let's see what happens with Argentina. So let's say, I'm going to take out the display name filter here, because I think that's just going to confuse people too much. So we'll say like Argentina. And now I don't need the or down below, because I think that's going to be okay. So let's go select that, and I have no... Execute again. All right. So how many people ended up showing up from this? About 10,000. So that's kind of workable. That might actually work. And if we look at their locations, they're all over the place. Well, they're mostly in Buenos Aires. If I scroll down, is there anybody who doesn't live in Buenos Aires? Holy smokes. They all live in Buenos Aires. Hold on, let's try something else. Let's say location count star as Rex, group by location, order by count star descending. Let's see if there are people who don't live in Buenos Aires, because that just seems a little bit suspicious. Okay. Isn't that awesome how people choose these? Look at that. Look. So one's in Spanish, one's in English. Oh, I love human beings and the way that they put data into, anytime you give them an open text box, oh, the game is on like Donkey Kong. Okay, so this will work beautifully for my diabolical attempts. So we'll start out with this one. We'll say select star from users where location is like Argentina. And then let's go. I always love that people are like, oh, machine learning, it's going to solve everything. Now, what I love here, one of the things that I love about this execution plan, is SQL Server is using the index. But it's using the index in the same way that I use rental cars, especially rental cars in Las Vegas. Oh, there's some great like off-road kind of tracks outside Las Vegas that are just beautiful. Valley of Fire State Park. So it's using the index, but it's scanning the whole entire thing. It's not really seeking to it. If I hover my mouse over here and I look at the number of rows read by this, we read all 9 million rows in the table. In terms of a demo, this is fantastic. So my storytelling here is going to say, if you put in a leading percent sign, because I have to find all the people who have Argentina anywhere in there, then I'm going to have to scan that entire index. I'm not going to be able to seek to it. This is also such a beautiful way of telling a story for something else. And I hit the wrong button to transition over to this other camera. Let's try that again. So it's a beautiful way, I'm such a moron, it's a beautiful way of telling the story of sometimes I can fix things in the database side, or like, the film people say, fix it in post. Sometimes I can fix things on the database side. Sometimes you have to fix it in code. What I know, I guarantee it, when I publish this blog post talking about this with Argentina, somebody's going to be like, you could use a filtered index. You could have a filtered index that only lists the people in Argentina. To which point I'm like, are you an idiot? Do you think that we only ever search for Argentina? Who the hell would do? Why? How do you still have a job? But of course, I can't say things like that. I can say things like that on a live stream. I just can't say it in the blog post. People are like, you don't care about me, which is true. I don't. So what I'm going to say is, in order to fix this, you really would have to change something about the database itself. You'd have to change the way that you store that data. You'd have to put the country in a different column. So I can't fix that from a database side, but there are some that I can fix from the database side. That's great for storytelling because it'll lead right into the very next thing that I'll go through and talk about. Nigel, Peter, Sammy, good to see you. I don't know that I've ever seen you on a live stream. Good to see you, sir. All right, so that seals up the first demo that I'm going to do. I don't know that I'm going to make y'all sit through me watch or writing the blog post. Y'all will learn as I'm doing the demos, and so then I'll do the blog post later this afternoon. I have an emergency client still today. I have one of those weekend client deals. So I'm going, as soon as the live stream's over, I'm going back to writing their findings, but then I'll write the blog post in the afternoon. I don't know that you really want to see me. Y'all tell me. So I'll give you the choice. Would you rather watch me move on to the next demo, like stay inside SQL Server Management Studio and craft the next demo, or would you rather me write the blog post? So either say demo or write the blog post. And Nigel, you're totally right. I mean, like it's so, I'm always amazed that anybody even shows up for these, just because so often I'm, doing this stuff at the butt crack of dawn. All right, so I'll let y'all choose. Yeah, Santi, you're it is right. It is time for sunrise. The sun is rising over there, but the problem is it's totally foggy in San Diego today. This almost never happens. Richard, there's like you, and then everybody's up against you. And this is funny. When I took a poll amongst my training class students at one point, and I said, yeah, Gallenbugger, I asked the students, I said, what is your least favorite way to learn? What do you not like watching me do? Do you not like watching me do presentations? Do you not like watch reading something yourself? And almost everybody said, we want to watch you do demos. So I'm like, okay, all right, so there we go. Sanity isn't statistical. You're an outlier, right? I do have plenty of demolition queries. All right, so that's the first one. Now I'll segue into the next demo then. So what do I want to do for the next demo? As I was talking through the story there, I said, I can't fix that sargability problem in the database, but there are other kinds of problems that I can fix. One of the most common ones that I run into all the time is comparisons between two columns on the same table. So for example, show me all of the ones where my purchase history is greater than my most recent shopping cart basket. Or show me all of the ones where my ego is this and my skills is this, as I've said recently to a client. You got a great thing. Composite keys. Merlin, that's exactly it. When you're looking at two different things on the same table, the sargability doesn't really work there. So let's craft an example of that. And to do it, I'm going to go look at the user's table and look at columns that I can compare to each other. So I'm going to say up here, that's something I can't really fix in post, but others I can. And then let's save that just to make sure that I don't have that done. Now let's go over to the users table. Someday there will come a time where I don't just sing to myself, but not today, Satan. So here's the users table. One thing that I could do is dates. I could do a date comparison between two columns. So I could say, for example, a comparison between creation date and last access date. How many people's last access date is within a day of them creating their account? Like people who created their account, did some activity, and then walked away and never came back again. I've written a demo like that before, and I really, really enjoy it because you find something interesting inside the database. Another thing that I could do is I could do numbers. I could say down votes versus up votes, for example. Show me how many people are buttholes. Show me how many people have cast more down votes than they have up votes. So I'll let y'all choose which one we do. Would you rather do the date comparison or would you rather do a number comparison? I'll let y'all choose. Yeah, Jim says vote. I agree. I agree. Either dates or numbers. Which one would you rather compare on? Wow, y'all are surprisingly unanimous. All right, so it looks like most of y'all said date. Okay, so the demo query I'm going to write then is people who just got super glue. How did that happen? So I'm going to say, show me people who created their account and then did something, but then never, hardly ever logged in again. So let's see, select from DBO users where date diff days, we'll start with hours because I think I might, and I think it's HH, yeah, cool. Creation date, last access date is less than 4. So show me people who created their account, did some stuff, and then after 4 hours kind of walked away. Order by reputation descending. We'll say top 100 star, and let's try that. And I'll show you if it works out the way that I think it's going to. Yes. So this is so interesting to me. So this is people who created their account. His was on, just to say, February the 8th in 2010. He didn't access it again after that, and yet he has 24,000 reputation points. That's incredible. How does something like that happen? So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to turn around in order to do funny demo storytelling is I'm also going to see how the heck did this person get that many reputation points? So I'm going to go check. It's either that they posted an amazing answer or an amazing question, one of the two. So let's see. Oh, and I'll do an index for it here too. I'll do the funny storytelling about the posts, how they got that amazing reputation here in a second. So let's see SQL Server's execution plan. Right now, Clippy's not even recommending an index. He's like, oh no, I got nothing. If you need me, I'll be over here scanning 9 million rows out of the users table. And then I'm going to go through and sort all 9 million rows sorted by creation date, last access date difference. So that sucks pretty bad. And so maybe we could create an index on those two columns in order to give Clippy a fair shot. So let's say create index, creation date, last access date on DBO users, creation date, last access date. And I'm going to create it the other way too. I'm also going to say create index last access date, creation date on DBO users, last access date, creation date. And you know what? I'll even include reputation. Let me even do that. So let's say we'll drop this index and then we'll go create it again with including reputation because we're asking for them sorted by reputation. Oh, this is going to be really sweet. Watch this. Include reputation and then include reputation. I just had a diabolical idea. So I'm going to go create both of those indexes, including reputation, and let's see if SQL Server uses them. Let's go copy this out for storytelling purposes. Now I have both of those indexes, and I'm going to ask y'all, let's see how smart y'all are. Let's see if y'all are smarter. Now, Tasia, I absolutely do, totally do. Yes, they don't help in this situation, though. Even regular indexes don't help in this situation. You'll see why. Don't help me seek, whereas column stores often do. All right, so now comes an interesting question. Will SQL Server use either of those indexes to accomplish this query? Now, I'm not asking you to seek because obviously SQL Server can't seek to one particular date. There's no point in time that we can jump to in order to find these because after all, if I go through and execute this query and I look at the results, the people's creation date is all over the map and people's last access date is all over the map. So we know we can't seek to either of those two indexes, but now comes time for a test. Do you think that SQL Server used either of those indexes as part of its work? So I'll let y'all tell me. We'll see, did SQL Server use either of those indexes as part of this work? Yes or no? Now's your chance to show off if you know the correct answer, or be forever shamed in public on a YouTube and Twitch recording if you are incorrect. Ah, DBA, not the DBA you're looking for! You, I love that you said a friend said. That's fantastic. So lots of you say no. And Kenny had an interesting thing over on YouTube. Kenny said there are too many key lookups. Are there, Kenny? Are there? Because I only said top 100. Oh, let's go take a look. And, oh, that's ridiculous. So did SQL Server make the right decision here? Did SQL Server choose correctly? Let's go take a look. So the way that we measure queries is we use setStatistics.io. setStatistics.io on. If I turn Statistics.io on, and then I take that query and I let SQL Server choose, and then I also say with index equals, if I force SQL Server to use one of the indexes, and I also agreed with my friend, that's good. Teja said the first index, so we'll use the first index as a hint, and then we're going to run them both back to back. The way that we're looking to see which one was faster is we go look at messages to go look at logical reads. Now in here, scanning the entire table was 140,000 logical reads. When I forced the index, it used 4 million reads. If I go over and I look at the execution plan, SQL Server does something kind of funny. So in the top one, SQL Server scans the whole table in order to get what he wants, then he sorts them by reputation descending. But in this one down here, SQL Server says, and I always use a guy's voice for SQL Server because he's dumb and stubborn and refuses to ask for directions. He's all, trust me, I got this, when he doesn't usually got this. SQL Server says, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scan this entire index, comparing all these people's creation date and last access date. I'm going to look at all of them. And then I'm going to do key lookups for every single one of them. SQL Server, I only need 100. I only need 100. Could you do me a favor? Could you move this sort right here? Could you move that right after the index scan? Because you have everything that you need here on this index scan to accomplish this. You have, on that index, you have all 3 of the columns that you need, creation date, last access date, and reputation, in order to get the top 100. Can't you just please be a big dear sweetheart and move that sort over there to move that out of the way, right here? SQL Server says, no. Whenever you see SQL Server using an index plus a combination of a key lookup, it like handcuffs those things together to the chair in the closet. It's a SQL Server's fetish, I suppose. SQL Server handcuffs these things right next to each other. And Gawambunga says sometimes we'd like to draw out our own query plan. Well, you can if you change the query. So if I was willing to change the query, I'll show you what I could do. I could say, actually, let's ask y'all, how would you modify this query? And I'm going to go run the original without the index hint just to put it, well, actually, I'll run the one with the hint because it'll be a little bit more illustrative for my storytelling. Drag and drop execution plans, right? How might I change this query in order to get SQL Server to move this sort right here, right after it does the index scan, so that we only do 100 key lookups? Is there a trick that I can use without the date function? No, I actually need that date function. I need to calculate that. Select the used into a temp table. I like that. Not the DBA you're looking for. That's not bad. 7 lies, an inner select. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Now, cranky bastard. I shouldn't be saying that out loud. That's what happens when I just write that down. Yes, and G Surgeon from over there in Amsterdam, both of them nailed that. So, can I move the sort? So let's say I'm going to take the exact original query, copy, Paste this down here. So what I'm going to say with top 100, gee, surgeon, with top 100 users, that doesn't work. I wish it did, but top 100 users as, and Malik, I love that. I'm going to do that next. As select top 100 ID, reputation from DBO users. And let's copy this out, paste. And get this in over here, and get this in over here. So now I have a separate little sub-select here. Now the key, no pun intended, the key in order to making this work is that the CTE can only use columns that are on the index and nothing else. So this is a layer deeper than I would expect a regular developer to go, because regular developers shouldn't have to be aware of what columns are on which indexes in order to get their job done. This is something that I would consider a development DBA to focus on, because you're also building technical debt when you do this. If someone happens to change the indexes, your query is screwed. But now that we have that, let's change it as from top 100 users, T, inner join DBO users U on TID equals UID. Now I don't need this where clause because the where clause is already done by the query up there. And I'm going to use the sort from the one up top, and I may need to resort it. We'll see what SQL Server does. And I don't need 100 or 1000 or 100 star there. I just need U star. So here's the query. Now, so now we've separated it. Now SQL Server does an index scan, does the sort up over here, and then we can turn around and do the key lookups way far over there. Botsko says, why have top 100? I think you mean right here. I don't technically need that. I could totally take that out. And if I take that out and go execute it, that still works exactly the same way. Doesn't make a difference at all. I'm usually like a belt and suspenders kind of guy. If I only want 100 rows, I just want to make doggone sure that there are only 100 rows, because heaven forbid you end up with duplicates on a column. I've had cases where people had an identity column, then they turned on set identity insert on, and they put in duplicate rows. Trueshit says, will offset fetch give the same query plan as top 100? Because that's not the focus of this demo, I'm going to set that aside for now. Okay, so this works, but I have to change the query to get that. Oh, also, just to show you, how does this do on logical reads? It reads less pages than there are in the table. It's only reading 34,000 pages, so that's good. The problem, though, is that I had to change the query to get this. Now, is there a way that I could get that exact same kind of improvement without changing the query? Let's go back up to the original query, and I'll copy this out. Now, I'm going to say, just for my blog post notes, that required changing the query, though. Can I get a good plan without changing the query? Marathon says, wow, good to see you there, Meryl. All right, so now, he says, wow, you're consistent. So now, can I get a good plan without changing the query? The DBA you're looking for says get someone else to change it. That's actually pretty good. The other one that one of you came up with, Malik says a computed column, and that's where I wanted to go with this. What I can do is I can pre-bake that conversion in order to make it work. I can say alter table DBO users, add hours since hours between last access. I'm going to do an underscore in here. Last access date and creation date as, and then copy that out. Copy, paste. Then I'm going to say create index, copy, paste, on DBO users, boom. Now, I know that those of you who may have played around with computed columns, you may say, Brent, why aren't you persisting that? That's kind of beyond the scope of what I want to explain here. Books online will tell you that, Tasereb says, wouldn't this take up space? No, that's the beautiful part. So watch this. I'm going to execute it. I'm going to count down. Let me move this around here so that I can put it up on the screen. I'm going to count down from 3, 2, 1, and I want you to watch how fast this goes. 3, 2, 1, done. The reason why it happens instantly is when you add a computed column, all SQL Server has to do is add metadata. It doesn't have to rewrite that entire all those 8K pages. The column is just instantly there. But right now, it's calculated every time we query the table. It doesn't take up any extra space because it's just computed. However, if I come back over here and then I need to still access it or index it, indexing it is the part that takes time because SQL Server is going to add another non-clustered index just like any other non-clustered index. You are absolutely right. Thank you. I appreciate that. So now that I have that, if I turn around and run the query again, keep in mind I'm going to run the original query. And I am not pointing at the computed column. SQL Server still does a clustered index scan. So why? Why is SQL Server doing this clustered index scan and filtering it way over here in order to do this? What if I force the index? Can SQL Server use the index for that? With index equals, copy, and paste. Let's go try that. And that doesn't look good. It took a little minute there. Yeah, index seek, so seek quote unquote, but it still had to do a whole lot of key lookups because it's not doing the sort until later. Now we're right back up to the problem that we had that made us put in the CTE. SQL Server can do an index seek, but because so many rows match, because there are so many people with a creation date between last access date and creation date less than 4 hours, the reason why is that most people who use Stack Overflow do it for throwaway account purposes. They'll go create an account just to ask a question, then they'll walk away and never come back. There are like 1.3 million people inside here. And remember how I said that these two are handcuffed together? SQL Server is going to do all of these before it goes and does the sort. This one here isn't enough to get us across the finish line. Santi says, are we in the where clause, aren't we supposed to use the new column? Nope, you totally don't have to. SQL Server automatically figures out, that's why it says index seek here. SQL Server automatically figures out that you're querying something it has an index on, so you don't even have to do that. Now, Richie says index hint. See, I'm doing it. It's right there. I got an index hint right there. I'm using it, and it works. But the problem is it doesn't break up this handcuffing type thing. So y'all are all on interesting things. Contact administrator said, will the CTE ever be the solution to moving the sort closer to the scans? You can if you can change the query. A lot of us can't change the queries when we go and do performance tuning, though. So there's another trick that we could use, though. Right now, the problem is that I have this in my execution plan. I have a sort because the query is doing this. Is there a way that I could get rid of the sort? Let's try something else. Let's try another index. Let's try creating an index on... Richie says, I just jump back and forth. You're not paying attention, which is okay because you have a real life. What if I create another index? What if I create an index on this and creation date and reputation? So I'm going to try, yes, Richard says put it in the index. I'm not sure if that's a put it in the closet reference or what's going on there. Let's try reputation and then that. Reputation and then that. Then let's try the other way. Let's try this and then reputation, and see if either of those get us what we're looking for. And we'll try one more with the query, copy, and paste. This time I'll take out the index hint and let SQL Server make its own brilliant, dastardly decisions. Good morning, SQL sucks. So let's see here. Come on, SQL Server, create them indexes. If you ever want, okay, nope. So now let's go execute it again. Look at what, bam, bam, bam. That is phenomenal. What's going on here? Now SQL Server is doing an index scan. An index scan sounds bad. An index scan sounds like we're reading the whole entire index. But if I go hover my mouse over this and I look at the number of reads or how many rows read, let me go move this around just a little so that as y'all talk, it doesn't pop up there. So up there it says number of rows read. We only read 76,000 rows and we're out of here. Now we have the index operation and the key lookup right next to each other because there's no sort in the plan. We don't need to sort this thing anymore because this whole thing is already sorted by reputation. SQL Server chose the index that leads with reputation and then uses this. So here, if I go in and look at the number of logical reads, woohoo! So before, our 140,000 was scanning the entire table. Then we did some index hinting and whatnot. We got it down in the 20, 30,000s. And now we got it down to just 500 reads, no sort, no CPU time. It just executes absolutely instantly. But to get here, I had to jump a few hoops. In order to get here, I had to put in an index on reputation plus a computed column. I had to add the computed column. The more complex your queries become, if you truly want to fix sargability problems, the more work you're going to have to do to get around it. Tejareb said, so this index scan over here, is it a backward scan? I would assume so because we're ordering by reputation descending. And sure enough, yep, it is a backwards index scan. So SQL Server goes to the end of the phone book and reads backwards. Not the DBA you're looking for says, would the plan change if our where clause was less selective, like less than 5 million? Yes, but if I have someone who's bringing back 5 million rows on a production system, we're going to have a talk about your access, and I'm going to go give you an Etch-a-Sketch with which you can use to write your queries and go query Microsoft Access instead of my production SQL Server. He says, what about if it's less than 5 minutes? Okay, so watch this though. As soon as I change this to something else like minute, and then I say less than 5 minutes, I don't have a computed column on that. I don't have a date diff on minutes. So SQL Server's still doing this, but then it's having to do some filtering over on the outside. It's having to go check our minutes across the span there because it doesn't know where to jump in at for that index. All right, so I'm happy with that. That's a pretty good start on showing a couple of cases where you can fix sargability problems with A, changing the SQL, and B, computed columns. I'm going to go switch over here for a second and thank this week's sponsor. So this week's sponsor is Quest. Quest has put together a free ebook with advice from me, Panal, and Janice from our recent webcasts over at Quest with tips on how to make your queries go faster. So you can go get that for free over at brentozar.com/go/optimization. It's the one that says SQL Server looks slick, but I think there is a faster, better optimized database servers out there. You're welcome to go find them. Good luck. Nara says, hack me, please. It's not my fetish. Gaumbunga says, with a text column, when you put %text, is there nothing you can do other than using a search engine? There is. The other thing that you can do is trigram. Santi, I'm not going to go deeper on that one. It's a great question, but I'm not going to go deeper just because it's not related to the blog post. And you're welcome to, when the blog post comes out, go use the same script so you can experiment for yourself there too as well. So there is something else that you can do for text searches. I'm not going to run a demo on it, but I'm going to show you the post. So if you search for Paul White trigram search, Paul White has this way of doing string searches with SQL Server where he breaks words up into 3-character chunks and then does searches on 3-character chunks. I don't frickin' ever do this technique. This is way beyond the work that I would ever go into. But the people who really have to make that kind of thing fast are really into that. So go for them. All right, so that gave me two indexes, or two examples of sargability searches. We talked about the date diffs, and we talked about location as a string. Another one that I want to do is comparing things across two tables. If I want to find things across two tables, now let me think about, if I go back over into SQL Server Management Studio, let's go put in over here. So I'm going to say, just to recap what I did there, I had two ways to fix that, either with query tuning, but no DB changes, or DB changes, which, but no query tuning. That worked. It's you and me both. You and me both. That worked well for single table non-SARGable scans or searches. But what about two table searches? So now it made my brain post hurt, or made my brain hurt. Now I got to think about what could I do that involves two tables. You know what I didn't tell you? Oh, I didn't finish the thing about what's funny about people who only created one, were only there for a short period of time, but had epic high reputation. Let me go show you that. That's a phenomenal, maybe I can make that work with the next demo. Let's see. So let's go take our query. Let's go find, whoops, that's the minutes. Let's go take the hours one. And then let's take that same exact query, but now I'm going to join it out to the posts table in Stack Overflow. Posts is where you keep questions and answers. Posts is where you keep questions and answers. So let's say from you, inner join DBO, post P on, U ID equals P owner user ID. Where date diff, now I got to be more specific that this is the user's creation date and the user's last access date. I want to find the posts that they created in that short span of time. So let's see. I've got the posts there, order by, so I'm going to say U reputation, U display name, and then P star. We'll do P star. P star. And execute. So what I'm trying to find here is I'm trying to find the people who, and I don't have an index on owner user ID. I should really get that started in another window because this is going to suck pretty bad. Actually, I should put that in the same window just so that I have it. Create index owner user ID on DBO posts owner user ID. Go. Copy, new, paste. Create that, and then while this runs, let's see if I can get this with no lock. I know. But I just want to see at least if this can get started doing its thing. Oh, you know what I should have done is with online equals on. With online equals on, execute. Just so that those two can go run at the same time. Let me make sure that they're both actually executing, that I don't have any lock waits going on here, and they do not. Beautiful. They're just waiting on stuff like CX packet and memory allocation, so that is fine. Okay, perfect. So what this is going to find out is it's going to find out people who had one and done questions, like they asked something and then they got amazing reputations. While it runs, I'm going to show you one that I really love. Socks, Sitestackoverflow.com. There we go. That's it right there. How can I pair socks from a pile efficiently? Yesterday, I was pairing the socks for my clean laundry, and I figured out what I was doing is not very efficient. I was using a naive search, picking one sock and iterating the pile to find its pair. As a computer scientist, I was thinking, what could I do? You could get a hobby. And I would like to bash this person for asking this question, but look at the number of upvotes that it got. So then you go down further and look at all the answers. There are 98 answers. 98 people saw that question about sorting someone's socks and they said, clear my calendar. I have work I need to do. I need to go figure out computationally what is the most efficient way in order to sort socks. These are my kind of people. This is absolutely true. No, we are definitely not going to get to that point in the presentation because I don't ask a lot of good questions over at Stack Overflow, and I also don't put in a lot of good answers. But this is just, yeah, Jim, I agree. This is like the best interview question I've ever seen for a computer programmer. This is a great thing. The architecture of the brain is totally different than a modern CPU. This question makes no practical sense. We win because all we have to do is spread all the socks flat on a surface. Thanks to human visual stuff, this isn't really that hard. Notice any matching pair, remove socks from the pair from the surface. Like, that is pretty smart. Then this, case number 1, all socks are identical. Wow. Okay, that's pretty smart. So it's really funny. I mean, they come up with all these good ideas. This is stuff that I never would have thought of. So search for how can I pair socks from a file efficiently. Some have holes. So you want to group together the ones that have holes so that if you're going to be in an ambulance, those aren't the kinds of socks you want to wear that day. All right, so that's taken a little while in order to create this index. That's probably a good time for us to go hit a bio break. So we'll take a 5-minute bio break and we'll come back right at the top of the hour. And then we'll dig a little deeper into this and we'll do a 2-table example. So I'll see y'all back here in 5 minutes. The audio's still on. Oh, that's great. I should see. I'm glad I checked before I went into the bathroom because that would have been awkward. You heard me making coffee, but that wasn't that big of a deal. Let's see here. Okay, welcome back. So it's funny. Pudota asked, "Are those windows sealed, or can you open them?" They are sealed. This is like a LEED platinum building where it's super, eco-friendly and all that kind of thing. So we have a door going out onto our balcony, but that's it. You can't open any of the windows, which presents a little bit of a problem if this building loses power, because all throughout the entire apartment is floor-to-ceiling windows, and we're on the morning sun side of the building, and holy moly, it is really, really hot if you don't have the air conditioning on. My neighbors on the other side, not the DBA you're looking for, said no, it could just get dark. No, it's because of the way the white balancing works on the cameras and all that. My neighbor on the other side of the building who has afternoon sun, my neighbor on the other side, for the first like 6 months that we lived here, his electric bill never got below like $1,000 a month. $1,000 a month for his electric bill. So it was pretty stunning. I felt so sorry for the guy. We're friends, like outside of the apartment kind of thing. And he actually works or has a solar company installing solar. So he's really pissed about the whole electricity thing. It's getting hot in here. Really pissed about the electricity thing because he can't even put in solar in an apartment building. It just doesn't work. Cranky says, want chair. I actually have a chair. It's just around the corner, and I just wheel it in whenever I'm going to, as soon as the webcast is over, immediately put the desk down into a sitting position. And so for those of you who haven't seen a motorized desk before, I'll show you to check this out. So if I switch over to here, just so that y'all can see, the desk, if I push a button, automatically goes down into a seated position, so which is really nice because then I can be working and I don't have to change anything about my setup. So we'll put this back over here and then come back over to my regular camera here. There that goes. All right. So when last we met, I showed you the socks question. Looks like I grow larger. Oh, that's funny, as if I'm getting taller. And it would kind of work that way if I was using a sit-down webcam too. What I need to do, or what I wanted to show you next, was those people who did one-off, create your account and then disappear. What were some of the questions that they asked? And this is kind of amazing. You're not allowed to have things like anything with gasoline in a high-rise, or natural gas, propane, anything like that. We're not even supposed to have gas grills. I don't have one because I don't do any kind of cooking. I just like to watch other people cook. Let's look at the output of that query. So if I come back over here, my index creation is finished. I don't need this anymore. If I look at the output of that query, and I'm going to take, where's the score column for posts? Let's drag that over so that y'all can see it. And put it all inside of one. So here's this and this. So here are people who did one and done, create my account and then bail out. You'll see that if the title of their post is null, that means it's not a question, it's an answer. There are other things that indicate this too in the post table, but just in terms of the screenshot where we're at here. Ilwell says you can drag these columns. You can, but there's a bug in Management Studio that I'll show you next. It's absolutely hilarious. So in here you can see, Julie asked in Python, how do I read a file line by line into a list? Mike, a checkbox is not checking inside a div. What's the difference between this and this? How to get the build-in version number of your Android. So this works kind of cool in that you can see people who asked a brilliant question and then they got really high score and then they just never came back. And most of us are like, can I have your account please? Because your score is amazing. You have a really good reputation even though you just did something and then bailed. So that's kind of cool just to see out of curiosity. You can find all kinds of interesting stuff like this. For example, I was doing SQL Saturday Israel, and I wanted to find the top ranking question out of Israel. So that actually works really well for our next post. Oh, kind of, sort of. Not really. I guess not. The top ranking one out of Israel, if I remember right, was the socks one that somebody from Israel asked the question about the socks. I was like, wow, okay. So let me show you the bug, Will, just because this is kind of funny. Select top 1000 star from. That's not going to work. Let me do SP Blitz Cache. SP Blitz Cache and execute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop columns around. So I'll move this around just to show you what I'm about to do. So in SQL Server Management Studio, you can drag and drop columns around. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to switch places between the query plan and the warnings column. I'm just going to grab hold of the query plan and I'm going to drag it over to the left. Now before I do it, I'm going to leave it where it is now. Before I do it, if I click on the query plan column, this is the query plan. And you're like, Brent, well, that seems kind of obvious. Yeah, but right now, if I click on the query plan, I get the query plan. That's kind of how that works. But when I drag it, if I drag it over here and then I click on it again, I get the contents of the column that used to be in that ordinal. Oh, man, can you believe that? I can't tell you the number of times that I've dragged and dropped things around from one place to another, and I go to click on it, and I'm like, what is going on here? So, bug in SQL Server Management Studio. At some point, I should probably file that. Sure, why not? Let's do it today. So let's say, now, when you file a bug with Microsoft, SQL sucks, as I never noticed that. It's not bug at this level. So when you file a bug with Microsoft, how does it work? There are a couple ways you can do it. One is you can open a support case. You can open a support case with Microsoft, cost you $500 if they agree with you that it's a bug, which takes some time and work. If they agree with you that it's a bug, you get your money back and the fix goes out later. If it's not a bug, you just lost $500. Or if they say that it's not a bug, it works as designed, then they just you lose it and that's the end of it. I am so tempted to call in and report the bug. That would be kind of funny. So Amity says, what about Azure Data Studio? I don't know. What about it? Why would you ask an unrelated question like that? So that's one way to do it if you're willing to whip out the credit card and spend $500. The other way you could do it is you can file a bug report on one of Microsoft's sites. So where do you file bugs for Microsoft SQL Server? Let's go see. So I'm going to say, first we'll start with what a user would probably do. Help, and then technical support. So sure, let's click on technical support. And now we get feedback, Azure Forums. Do you know there's a browser inside of SQL Server Management Studio? There is. There totally is. So you can do things like eelslap.com. So then in here, you can do eelslap right inside your browser inside of Management Studio. Isn't that cool? Oh, you hadn't seen eelslap before? eelslap.com. eelslap.com, you can just slap people across the face with an eel. It's very satisfying. So if you didn't want to do that, let's go back and close that. You could surf Reddit or whatever it is that you want inside there. So let's go back into View Help. Amity says, oh, I've never used it. I thought you might have an opinion about it. I do. I like it a lot, but I don't use it for management. For management, I use Management Studio. For crafting T-SQL from scratch, I tend to use Azure Data Studio, but the execution plans are kind of crappy in Azure Data Studio right now. So I clicked Help Technical Support and I got this. I think I hit the wrong link. Let's go back over to SSMS. Help Technical Support. All right, so this link, and I would rather stab myself in the face than use the browser inside here because things like 1Password aren't going to work on the sign-in. Do you have a comment or a suggestion to help improve SQL Server? We'd like to hear it. So we'll say Management Studio Data Grip. Management Studio, click reorder column, and then you get like nothing. The search sucks so bad. The search is so bad inside feedback.azure.com. So what you do instead is you copy out the URL and you go over to Google. So you say Management Studio, click reorder column, site. And if you put site : in your Google searches, you get the site restricted just to that particular website. So it makes it really good for finding stuff. So now, I still am probably not going to find it because I don't think anybody's ever filed this bug report before. So I don't see it inside here. There are several more pages, but I'll go ahead and file this. So let's go file it. So let's say feedback.azure.com. And Let's go in there. So SQL Server. I don't think they're going to take Management Studio, but well, no, there's a Management Studio inside here. All right, screw it. SMS bug when you reorder columns in output. XML clicks clicking on column no longer works correctly. No, the first result wasn't related to the problem that I'm solving there. So then post a new idea. Because that reordering an XML column, this shows, oh no, look at that. Oh, that is the wrong one. Oh, this is so, that is so messed up. Look at that. So here they complained about the same, well, yeah, Wet Seal says this one. A good catch too, and both of us noticed it too as well. Look at this. Hi, Dammy Lawnfer. Thanks for taking the time to report this issue. We have investigated and found that this is a known bug that has not made it to the top of our list yet. I'm resolving this item for now. You're resolving it. You're resolving it? You didn't solve anything, much less resolve it. So we do have a work item tracking it. Poor, who was it, Sam or Dammy Lawnfer? I am totally voting for that. 10 years, 12 years, geez. So I'm going to have to sign in, and welcome to the worst sign-in experience ever, brento@brentozar.com. And now password. Now I got to go pull my password manager. Just a second while I go switch screens here for a moment. So let's go pull my password, 1Password, and then get that out and get live and see if that works. Copy, paste, sign in, and there it goes. Okay, signed in. So now I'm in. Now I'm in, and now I can vote for it. So let's go ahead and copy that out so that y'all can vote, and then I will put it over in Twitch. Let's see here. Where can I stick this over in Twitch without totally hosing up my entire broadcast? Make sure it doesn't put my audio in there. So the feedback item, put that link inside there so that y'all can vote. There you go. So now I voted on that. It's been 12 years. Can we get a status update on this? Thanks. I appreciate it. Post comment. All right, cool. So there we go. So at least, and I posted a comment. It doesn't even show up. Let's try refreshing the page. I hate feedback.azure.com so much. I hate it with a dark heart. It's not there. I'm not even gonna go there. It's just there's only one thing for this. So Jaded says the date on that is 2011. No, it's 2011 since they did an update on it. They put this idea back in 2008, and that is more than 10 years ago. That is a little disappointing. 3 votes now. Okay, all right, we're getting closer. All right, so that's funny. We went off on a little sidetrack there. Well, usually when things go into moderation, I mean, I like that, Amity, but when things go into moderation, usually there's some kind of message up on the screen for that. Okay, let's close out all that side stuff, and let's go back over to statistics. Funny, quote unquote. Yeah, exactly. So now back over on statistics. Now we played around with Reddit inside the web browser and reordering things. All that stuff's gone. Now, next up, I said I showed a couple of examples of sargability. I showed an example of just one column. I showed 2 columns on the same table. Now, when I walked away, I thought one way that I could do it was doing a 2 tables. I don't actually want to do 2 tables. I want to stick going with 1 table for the sake of this demo. What I want to do is I want to throw in user-defined functions because these come up a lot, and so they've kind of sort of been improved in SQL Server 2019, except not really, so we'll see how that works. So scalar user-defined, 6. It's like a hype train, but only for a feedback Azure request. So now I'm going to do it for a function inside the where clause. So another common cause functions. Now let's start with system-defined functions. or system functions. I don't really want to call them system-defined functions. So let's say, so I got an index on, I think I still have an index on display name. Let's go see, did I put one on display name for this demo? Yeah. So let's say select star from DBO users where upper of display name equals Brent. Now, logically speaking, that's not actually possible. Now, I'll put Ozar. Logically speaking, that's not really possible, of course, because if I uppercase something, then of course it shouldn't match a lowercase string. But I'm working on a case insensitive collation where case doesn't matter. Oh, good. So caching, you can't explain that. All right, good. Y'all are over there just hitting refresh continuously. Is it there yet? Is it there yet? Yay! Logically speaking, this query can't possibly return a row if I uppercased everything for display name matches lowercase of Brent Ozar, and yet here I am. So I define all possibilities. So this is a case insensitive server where case doesn't matter. However, even though case doesn't matter, SQL Server obeys exactly what you say. Oh, you want to uppercase everyone's display name? Well, I better do it, even if it doesn't matter. There are some things you can do in SQL Server where he looks for contradictions, and if you pass in certain things, he simply ignores your work because it can't logically happen. Here, if you tell him to do this kind of work, SQL Server will actually do the work. So this is a system-defined function, and this can make your query non-sargable. It's usually fairly rare that someone does something like this, or ltrim rtrim is another good example of that. But system or user-defined functions can also cause you some gotchas. Let's say that I put in, because at least see here, SQL Server has an accurate estimate on the number of rows that will come back. SQL Server's like, there's only a couple of people who would match this, Brent Ozar and his evil twin. That's where the estimated number of rows 2 comes in here. What happens if we wrap this same exact thing inside a user-defined function? Now, I never remember the exact syntax for creating a user-defined function, so you're going to watch me kind of wing it. But screw it. Let's go Google. Let's go see. So, how to create scalar function SQL Server. And let's see if we've got anything inside here that's going to give me a quick copy-paste. See, Panal, I bet Panal's on the webcast, and Panal is not on the home page. That's why, man, dang. I thought for sure you'd be on the home page, Panal. You're on the home page of everything. Clive, good to see you, Clive. I know somebody named Clive over in Isle of Man. I wonder if you're the Clive that I know over in Isle of Man. And if so, good to see you. If not, I don't care about you. Just kidding. It's probably like a lot of people in Isle of Man named Clive. But I love Isle of Man. It's just fantastic. So let's come over into Docs, and oh, it is you. Good to see you. Oh, very cool, man. So I was hoping to make it over this year. I was hoping to make it over in September, October, but the dang over quarantine rules make it pretty much impossible. He says, no, there isn't. Funny. So let's see here. Hopefully there's a good example all the way down at the bottom that we can just copy paste. Creating a scalar function. There we go. Beautifully. Copy and paste. Oh, templates. Oh, yes. And ST, I never think of using that. That's actually good. Uppercase, and we'll pass in string to upper. And this will be an nvarchar 4000, just to say. And then returns nvarchar 4000 as return. I wonder if I can just flat out return. I probably can't. Declare uppercase version nvarchar 4000 equals upper string to upper. I see it. What do you see, GovDBA? I see it, said the blind man. All right, so there's my scalar function. I know it's a terribly sad scalar function. So let's throw that in. Let's create, and I'll do create or alter just because I can, or alter. No, the length of the nvarchar doesn't affect it at all. Length of strings doesn't affect implicit conversion type stuff. Then let's put in the same exact query, and we'll use our user-defined function where uppercase display name equals Brent Ozar. Now I think I got to put in DBO. There we go. And now let's execute it. Now let's look and see how our function looks. Oh, scalar functions are so terrible. Now that's hilarious to me. So here, SQL Server A didn't use the index on display name, and B, it had no idea how many rows it thought were going to match. So that's one problem that's a part of it. There's so many problems with scalar user-defined functions. So Travolta. So there's so many problems with this. Scalar functions, any query that calls them goes single-threaded, but the one that's really bad is that's true. It's actually very typical for my code. Here's the big problem for me. SQL Server underestimates how many rows or overestimates how many rows are going to come back from it. So there's so many problems in here. It's not SARGable. SQL Server can't seek to it. SQL Server doesn't allocate enough cores. SQL Server does a table scan rather than using the index. The estimates are incorrect. I mean, I could just go on, and I will inside the blog post. So Microsoft made all this big deal. 2019, it's going to be super fast. Steve says, what version are you using? I am using 2019 Cumulative Update 5, the very latest as of this recording for 2019. But my database isn't in 2019 compatibility mode yet. This is one of the things that you gain whenever you put your database into 2019 compatibility mode is all of a sudden sexy music starts to play over the stereo, and in theory your queries run way faster. What I'm going to do is right click over on Stack Overflow, go into properties, go under the options, and there's this compatibility mode. Now, it changes a lot of stuff. It doesn't just change the thing that I'm about to describe here, but if I go put it into 2019, one of the things that's going to happen is why is the sky blue? I really don't know why they did that. It seems kind of idiotic to me. I'm with you in that it shouldn't be required, but it is. It's always funny how people ask me why questions, like why did Microsoft do something that way, when in reality, if you know the relationship between me and Microsoft, you'll know that they don't want to tell me jack. So are there any risks? There absolutely are. So let's change it to a higher compat level and then say OK. And then let's go through and run the exact same query again. And now a few things happened here that were kind of cool. One is that the function is not, there is no CU6. So if I hover my mouse over here on this index scan, see how now SQL Server has a much better estimated number of rows. Its estimate is now way more accurate. Plus, the query didn't need to go single-threaded because there's just not that much work to do. And we got the usage of the index. It's not a seek, though. It's still a scan. We're just now back to exactly the same problem that we had on earlier versions of SQL Server when we had it as the uppercase was in line inside the query. This is still non-SARGable. So let's see out of curiosity, just for laughs here. Warning, I gave you way too much memory. I gave you an excessive grant. I gave you 1 megabyte and you didn't use any. So SQL Server, what is the minimum memory grant you're allowed to give me? 1 megabyte? Why do you ask? Idiotic warnings. So the real problem inside here is that this query isn't SARGable. The real problem inside here is that we still can't do an index seek, and we're having to scan that entire index, meaning that we read like 40,000 8K pages. So we're right back to where we were before with the other queries. So how do I fix it? Well, one way is that you could just say, yo dog, if the casing doesn't matter, simply rip that out. Now, for fun, I'm going to try editing that function. I actually haven't done this before. I'm going to try editing that function to remove the uppercase part. Not the DBA you're looking for says, I didn't know there was a lower limit to memory. There is, and you get to set it over in here, if I right click on the server and I go into memory, if I go into here, there is minimum memory per query in kilobytes. So you get to set it to whatever you want. And then SQL Server still complains that it gave you too much memory. Now, Max's Pizza. I love that. That's very good. That's a nice reference there, inside joke. So I'll tell you a story about someone who went and changed minimum memory per query once. So this client, I got brought in for query tuning, and I had super secure. I had to go to their offices. Richie actually knows this client. I don't think he was there at the moment that this happened. So it was in downtown Chicago, and I'm sitting there. Exactly, Tejareb, that was this DBA's idea. This DBA was running a data warehouse on 1 terabyte servers, and the DBA said, I think every query needs more RAM. I want to guarantee that it gets a good, nice memory grant even when SQL Server gets a bad estimate. So that DBA said, I'm going to change min memory per query to 10 gigs. Now, the server had a terabyte of RAM, so 10 gigs at first doesn't seem all that big of a deal. Until you think about IntelliSense queries, monitoring queries, people just connecting in and getting one row for something. Management Studio connections. Any query running took 10 gigs. Web server queries just grabbing in to get one row. SSIS grabbing in to get 1 or 2 rows from a configuration table. And what was happening, because they would have 100, 200, 500 queries fire off all at once, exactly, bam, all of a sudden the server couldn't cache anything at all. Page life expectancy just went down to 0 all of the time, and no one would have ever thought to look there. I wouldn't have thought to look there, but that's one of the things that we now warn you about in SP Blitz. In SP Blitz, we warn you if you set any server level settings away from their default. It was pretty fun how that happened. Sridhar, you can subscribe to me on either Twitch or YouTube. If you subscribe on Twitch or YouTube, you get an email whenever I go live. So coming back over here, so now I've got that problem. So I'm going to try editing this function. I don't know that I want to go, I'm going to go off topic here for a second. So the problem that I'm having is SQL Server is, when I run this query, SQL Server's going, okay, you want to go through and uppercase everything? Well, all right, I'll do it. What happens if I take that uppercase out of the function? What happens if I say equals just string to upper? Like I don't make any changes now to the string whatsoever. Now will I suddenly get an index seek instead of a table scan, or instead of an index scan? And let's see what happens. And come on. That's idiotic. That's really kind of funny. Wow. Oh, now there is a convert implicit. Let's go down and see what that, but it's not warning. Convert implicit, the display name equals Brento's art. Let's try making the data types exactly correct. Let's try, Tejareb, I never thought about that. That's interesting. Display name, I want to say is 40. Let's try that. Let's try this, creator alter. Then let's try it again. Still scanning the entire table. That's funny. Okay, so that's not going to fix it. That's pretty amusing. One way that I could fix it is I could simply remove the uppercase of the display name, and that would work. But the other thing that I can do is I can create a computed column like we did earlier. I can create an uppercase version of the column and then index that. But of course, you can start to see that the more of those that I go and add into my table, the worse my Object Explorer is going to look. People who do select stars against their tables are going to have a very bad time and so forth. But okay, good. So I have now... I have a few different examples of sargability issues around single column, 2-column comparisons, and user-defined functions. The way that I write my blog posts is I'll usually go and put together the demo, and then I'll go write up the WordPress version afterwards, taking screenshots as I go. But I'm not going to schedule that for next week. That's probably going to be scheduled for like, hi. It's going to be scheduled for 2 or 3 weeks out from now, because I know that as I sleep on that, I'm going to think of more and more examples. And what I probably am going to want to do is make an entire week just out of that, a week out of sargability issues. First defining like what happens on a single table for single 1 or 2 column comparisons, then adding in multiple columns and comparisons across the multiple columns, stuff like that. So I'll stop the demos on that one there, and I'll switch into open Q&A. So if there's anything that y'all want to ask me in terms of questions and answers, you can put those into Twitch now. I'll give a brief shout out to this week's sponsor. So brentozar.com/go/optimization. You can go get a totally free ebook from Quest about how to make your queries go faster, how to do index tuning, query tuning, with advice from me, Penal, and Janice Griffin. I can never remember if it's Griffin or Griffith. I have friends who have both of those. Bert says, how did that one guy get all those reputation points? Go back and you'll see when you watch me through the replay, I actually show the posts that they did and the questions and answers that they did. So let me fire up featured chat so that I can put your questions on the browser on here. So let's see here, log in so that I can set up where's my dashboard? So that I can grab the queries. So I'm going to add that. And there we go. Okay, cool. So now everything that you want to ask, go ahead and fire away any questions that you've got there. And I'll add them over to the queue. Now let's switch over and start answering some of those questions. Not the DBA you're looking for says, if there was one feature you wish was in SQL Server, what would it be? For me, it's the ability to override no-lock hints. The ability to override no-lock hints. I don't think I've ever said that in public before because it's something that's come up repeatedly at multiple clients. And multiple clients recently, I've had the joy of dealing with an application where everybody had put in no-lock all over the place. And I'm like, look, the fix is really easy. All we have to do is turn on snapshot isolation or read committed snapshot isolation. Then I can opt queries into that instead. But if some yo-yo has been putting no-lock hints in their queries, I can't override that. If you ask for dirty data, you will get dirty data. So query, and generally that's true in all of SQL Server, query level hints tend to override things that are set at the server. For example, if your query asks for max.0, as in like an unlimited number of cores, you can get an unlimited number of cores even though the server level max.dop is only set at 1. So that's the thing that I would probably love most right now is the ability to override no-lock hints with some kind of server level or database setting that would force it to go away. Well, we're using like NoSQL in some places, so I guess that kind of is. Okay, so there's that one. Let me add a couple of other queries there are a couple of other questions over to the queue. So let's see here. Let me copy this out and do just a second. I'll set up another thing. Creator dashboard. Pop my chat out. Pop out. And put this over here. And put that in so that I can copy paste a few things. Darren, so YouTube this, and there we go. That's good. That's a start. So Manny says, hash join, merge join, nested loops. Oh, is this like keyboard bingo? Cursor, potato, time clock, limousine, lingerie, croissant, steak, booze. I can do that game too. So let's see here. Let's come back over to this. I know. Let's see here. Add a couple of others. All right, there we go. G-Surgeon says, regarding Query Store, I want to activate Query Store on the database server without disrupting anything. Is there a way to automatically activate Query Store when the agent restarts? Well, so Query Store is an option that's set at the database level. My bigger concern would be when you turn on Query Store, you can make things go dramatically slower. The thing to watch is Aaron Stellato's courses on Query Store. If you go search for So I'll pop open a web browser and I'll go Aaron Stellato Query Store. So Aaron has not only just blog posts that are free to the public, but she also has training classes on Query Store over at Pluralsight. I would always recommend that people go through that because it is so totally possible to bring your server down by turning on Query Store. You also wouldn't want it to happen when you're not around. So I wouldn't want to set it up to happen whenever agent restarts. But it's a setting that's at the database level. It has nothing to do with agent. So hopefully that answers that particular one. All right, let's come back over here, add a couple of things inside here. I'm going to go hit, let's see, this one. Sridhar says, what is the reason for SQL Server taking all of the memory of the server? Generally, SQL Server is going to be the only application that's installed on there, and you want SQL Server to cache as much as it possibly can because disks tend to be really slow. So you want SQL Server to use all of the RAM to cache data so that it doesn't have to go back to those stone tablets that your boss bought you in terms of storage. Let me, okay, hit the next one inside here. Wet Seal asks, what stops me from using max everywhere instead of nvarchar 100? So the problem is SQL Server bases your memory grants for queries on the size of your data type. It's not based on what you store inside of there. It's based on the data type. So when you use nvarchar max, nvarchar 4000, etc., your queries get artificially high inflated memory grants, and then that leads to other problems like resource semaphore weights. So you want to go with the smallest data type. That's why I highly recommend using tinyint for absolutely everything. No matter what, just always use tinyint, which of course is a joke. The drop table employee says, what is your most hated feature of SQL Server and why is it table variables? That's an interesting question. My most hated thing, you know what my most hated thing probably is no lock right now. Because I think that so many people misunderstand it and what it's good for. They don't realize that it literally gives you random output that you can't expect. People just test it a few times when nothing's going on the server and they think that they're okay. But they're like, well, it should be all right. The data doesn't change that much. I'm like, well, if it's not changing, you don't need no lock. Well, we have blocking sometimes. That's because your data's changing and you're getting unreliable results with no locks and so forth. Masima says, how can I list all non-SARGable queries? Go hit SP Blitz, Blitz Cache. SP Blitz Cache will go through and analyze your plan cache, tell you the top 10 most resource-intensive queries. From YouTube, there was a question, what's the best way to test compatibility mode changes prior to releasing to prod? For me, it's a load test. Like take a load test that you would use against production and go run that same load test in another environment and compare all the query differences. Like capture all the query plans and compare the differences. Does anyone ever do that? No, never. Like freaking never. It's the kind of I want to write a blog post about things that Microsoft thinks that we do, but we don't actually do. Testing backups. Most people don't actually test their backups. Most people don't actually have a load test that mimics production workloads because it's just too hard because your application keeps changing. You got developers who are shipping features every single week. Well, me and Richie, we ship features every other week. We're shipping the other weeks we work on my bugs from my queries. So you've got developers shipping features all the time and it changes the queries and your data is constantly changing. So in theory, it's a load test. In practice, what most of my clients end up doing is that they come in on a Saturday and they flip the compat level higher. They go to a higher compatibility level. And then they measure the queries that are different over the weekend, and then they flip it back to the prior compatibility level and make out a project for their folks to work on to gradually improve query performance based on the problems that they had during that weekend. But what they often find out is that there's so much work involved to make it work with the new compatibility level that they just go, screw it. Next up, someone asked from YouTube, are you presenting at any virtual conferences this year? No, I made a tough decision that I said, you know what? I sell online training and I do Twitch streaming. And and YouTube streaming and all that. This user experience that y'all get, showing the questions live and me being able to do all this high definition camera stuff and switching between cameras, I can't do that if I go through, Jim Bob's Online Conference Incorporated. They have these crappy conference platforms where the webcam looks like, "Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to be talking to you about potatoes." It's got a really crappy video and audio experience. The question experience performs terribly. So I'm like, I would rather just work directly with y'all and sell you the stuff directly and do free things directly whenever it works for my schedule. I am a huge fan of a lot of virtual conferences that are happening out there. There's a great one coming out, Data Minds. Data Minds is by a great team out of Belgium. They do a fantastic job, and they're putting out a totally free online conference. So if you search for the Data Minds, MINDS conference, totally free. Welcome to the club, Ross-Chuck. Welcome to the club. Next up, damn. SQL Sucks. Oh, so I accidentally deleted it, but SQL Sucks asked a question, how should I read plans, right to left or left to right? Most of the time I explain it using right to left, but you can also think of it as it's a demand generated plan, meaning that the stuff on the left actually calls everything else to go and get data. So that's why you'll hear execution plan pros like Grant Fritchie and Hugo Cornelis say that sometimes when you're reading execution plans at a really expert level, I don't know why I used air quotes, they're actual experts. Sometimes when you read plans at an expert level, you do want to read left to right. For my audience, y'all aren't that bright. So we're going to read plans from right to left, which is usually what we need to do in order to understand what's going on. Shane, welcome to the club. Thanks. David says, will the playing cards and stats demo be soon? I've written part of the T-SQL one, but the problem is it takes a lot of prep, and I had just one client after another this week, including an emergency client now that in 18 minutes I got to go start writing their findings again. Bottom to top, so it's always right to left or left to right, and then top to bottom. So, and I go into way more details in that in my Fundamentals of Query Tuning class, so Fundamentals of Query Tuning. Next up, Tajareb says, do you have any courses for optimizing data warehouse queries? So the thing with data warehouses is often you're not allowed to change the queries. Most of the data warehouses that I work with, the queries are written using a drag and drop tool by end users, like they're using tools like reporting services, Power BI, what's the one that begins, Tableau, and you just can't control those queries. So I don't really see a point in running a course on that when you can't change the queries. If you can change the queries, well, then all my classes are kind of sort of the same. Next up, Kurt says, any reason not to turn on trace flag 2451 enables last actual execution plan. Yes, performance. So it does have a performance hit. So you'll want to test it. The worst case scenario is queries that are running 1,000 times or more per second. If you have something that's very high transactional OLTP, 1,000 times per second, you will notice a slowdown as you turn on last actuals for complex execution plans. So I would turn it on, but only if you've got something that's lower in terms of batch requests per second than that. Next up, Rahul says, my lead is stubborn and doesn't like non-clustered column store indexes. He adds 7 to 10 columns in a unique clustered index. I know this is dumb, but I need your insights. Let me zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to say, when you disagree with someone else on your team, how do you approach it? Because sometimes you're wrong, sometimes they're wrong. Like, what do you approach it? First off is you need to pick your battles. You need to understand whether this is something worth fighting. Because let's say that you prove them wrong. Is that good for your career? You got to be a little bit careful. You want to help them look good. Anybody else on your team that you disagree with and you know that they're wrong, in this case, you're usually right. But whenever you know that someone else is wrong or you suspect that they're wrong, make sure you're going about it with the right motives, like you want to help them, and they're doing something that's destructive to the database. Like you're getting ready to prove that this is the number one thing inside the database that's killing our performance. I'm going to be honest with you, the 7 to 10 columns thing probably isn't the thing that's killing your performance to the most, because if that person's got that belief, they probably haven't been to a training class in like 5-10 years. But if you want to prove it, go watch my How to Think Like the Engine class. Watch my totally free How to Think Like the Engine class, and then work through that. I explain in there how you create good clustering keys, how they're included in the non-clustered indexes. And then that way you can go to your peer or your lead, whatever, and go, hey, check this out. I found this really interesting course. You might like it. And if they care about learning, then they may dive into it and go say, oh, wow, I learned something inside there. But they may also go, oh, that Brent guy's a moron, and just set it aside and not do it, in which case you also kind of know you're not going to be able to prove anything to them. Can't tell me nothing. All right, let's see here. Let's add a couple more of the questions to the queue. Add these and add these. And there we go. There were a couple over from YouTube too. Let me grab this. So YouTube, boom. And then let's see here. Let's grab another one. YouTube, you. And then I think that's all. Okay, cool. So let's see. Next up is Botsko. Botsko says, one question that I cannot formulate for a long time. In general, does a query in 2012, what? I'm not even sure I know what you mean in terms of what you're asking. Why did I put that query up on the screen? I have no idea what you're asking. You still haven't formulated that. Let's see. Let's show the next one. So the next one was Mayuresh. Can you recommend on using ID as an integer or a GUID? An integer. Integer is going to be smaller. It's going to be ever ascending. If you want to learn more about how to design good clustering keys, watch my Mastering Index Tuning class, where we spend about 45 minutes on designing the right clustering keys. We talk about my SUNY principles and how that determines what columns and how many of them you choose. Next up, Tajareb says, sometimes some parts of execution plans won't even get executed. Yeah, for example, let's say that I said in the Stack Overflow database, let's say, no, Tajareb, don't give, no, remember, my friend said, and your friend is wrong there. There are times where GUIDs are awesome as clustering keys. And to learn more, you can watch my Mastering Index Tuning class. So Tajareb, to illustrate that one, let's say that I said, go find all of the users whose location is XXXXX, something that doesn't exist, and then join over to the comments table and show all of their comments. Well, SQL Server will build an execution plan that has both the users table and the comments table, but it doesn't actually execute the comments part because it didn't find any users who live in XXXXX. So you'll see parts of the execution plan that are there just in case you find data, because SQL Server always assumes that you're looking for data that actually exists. Unless you're looking for something that violates constraints, that's different. Next up, let's see here. D. Tovey says, we have a supplier who uses heaps with indexes. We've checked and there doesn't seem to be any forwarded records and low fragmentation. Are they using table rebuilds to fix the issues with heaps? I'm trying to get them to use tables, but they are polite and I don't think that they will. If you don't have forwarded records and you don't have fragmentation, I wouldn't pick that battle. I would just walk away from it and go, okay. They may not be using rebuilds. They may not be doing updates, though. Heaps work fine in situations where they're insert only and all queries are scans, like you're going to scan the whole entire heap, or where you have non-clustered indexes to support the queries that you're working on. So I would pick another battle. I'd pick something else, because if you don't have forwarded fetches and you don't have fragmentation, the heap isn't the biggest problem on your plate right now. It's really funny, very often with like training classes and stuff, people will learn something, they find a hammer and they're like, I'm going to use this hammer everywhere. I heard heaps are bad. I'm going to hit everything with a heap. And sometimes that's just not that big of a problem. Let's see here. Next up, Camaro. Good to see you, Camaro. Says, good morning, Brent. Apologies if this has been discussed before. It is not. What happened to DBA reactions? Did people stop submitting GIFs? No, I ended up shifting gears in my life and just going, I got to pick my battles. There are just only so many hours in the day, and I want to focus on things that are going to help me get closer to retirement. There are times in my life where I have a whole lot of spare time and I can go do projects that I have fun with that are like kind of hobbies like DBA reactions. And that hobby just went its course for me. Like I didn't want to spend time on it anymore after that. So I just stopped opening it up and looking at the submissions and all. It was fun and enjoyable from time to time, but then I just went, okay, I'm going to reprioritize things differently. I had fun doing it. It's on my kind of a low priority list to export a list of all of the sayings and GIFs and then build something in like AWS Lambda that will rotate and randomly post ones from the past because there are thousands of ones out there and they're still funny. But I just haven't gotten around to doing that yet. And then next up, Kevin says, question about consulting. I missed your last Ask Me Anything. Can you talk about if it was different for you, or tough for you to find and recruit senior level DBAs before your business pivot to just me as a consultant? No, I had the opposite problem. There were so many people I wanted to hire. Oh, I would have loved to have hired probably 30 people. I can think of a good 30 people that I would have loved to hire. Whenever we posted a job, we were utterly overwhelmed with applicants because we took this stand as a company that it's going to be 9 to 5 only. We're not going to work you after hours. You'll never have to travel. We'll give you a hardware allowance. We give you vacation. We give you the best vacation or best health insurance we can possibly give you. Like we wanted to have only the very best, and so we had the absolute best benefits there was out there. Annual company retreat all over the place. So it wasn't hard for us to find senior level people. The hard part was making sure that we had enough business in advance to make sure that they were taken care of. Because when you have the slightest hiccup nationally, like the coronavirus thing, you have the slightest hiccup, you are still paying all of their salaries, hardware benefits, vacation, health insurance, all that stuff you're still paying, even when no money is coming in. So if you have the best benefits, and yeah, exactly, if you have the best benefits and health insurance and all that, then you're going to drain. I mean, it wouldn't have been a big deal for us to lose $100,000 a month easily if we had a shut off temporarily in business. So when I shifted gears and went to go, I'm going to be the only person, it was more about risk avoidance than it was about trying not to hire so many people. I'm just like, I don't want to have that much risk, and I don't really enjoy management. Manny, I'm not going to go into that here. You can Google for that, and there are a lot of good posts out there on that one. There are even videos out on YouTube as well. And then Mayuresha says, can the SQL Server community Slack channel be used by developers to ask DBA questions on best practices? Yes, go to the SQL Help channel, the SQL Help channel in there, and it is incredibly active. It is spectacularly active. The one thing I would say is, in order to ask a good question, make it real life. Make it a problem that you're currently facing. Don't be like, I hear heaps are bad, tell me why heaps are bad. Because that's really more of a training class type thing than it is a question. So if you want to learn just general stuff, go to a training class, YouTube video, online conference, whatever. If you have a specific question, that's where the SQL Help channel is. Drop table employees. Me too. I've had several times where I've asked questions on there and people are like, oh my God, Brent actually asked questions. I'm like, yeah, I tend to get really hard stuff. Let's throw a couple of other things. Looks like one other or two others inside there. So let's see. Holding says, I share a server with another vendor where all their stored procedures are with option recompile. Should I make a case that this will cause my application to be affected? Rather than spotting a problem and then trying to go after it, instead, start from a really high level and ask, what's my server's problem? So let me give you a resource. If you say Brent Ozar performance check, I wrote a blog post on how to do a SQL Server performance check. If you go Google for Brenno's R performance check, there's a blog post out there on how you write up a performance check. And that way you'll start to understand what your biggest problem is. True story, I have had so many clients where people come in going, I know this is bad. Like my developers are using option recompile. I know this is bad. Help me teach them why it's bad. And then when we pop open the server, I'm like, no, actually, the server's on fire because you only gave it 4 gigabytes of memory and stone tablets for storage. So this helps you start from a very high level. Let's see here. So let's come back out over here and I'll get the last couple of questions. Y'all can stop asking questions now because I'll just hit the last ones that are out there in the list. So Malik says, if we restore TDE databases, do we have to back up the certificates? I'm getting a warning in Blitz. So the reason why we give you that warning over in SP Blitz is that I've seen situations where people will re-encrypt a database where they'll rotate the encryption keys and then forget to back up the database. I've also seen situations where they did a restore once and they're like, I'm good. They delete the backups and they delete the keys. So now at this point, they have prod, which has the databases, and the restored copy with the databases, but they don't have a copy of the key backed up anywhere. So just like anything else in SP Blitz, you may know better. You may know that you have a good copy of the key somewhere. The SQL Server doesn't know that. So anytime I'm using TDE, I'll keep backing up the certs on a regular basis. You can never be too paranoid on that because if you don't have the certs, you can't access the data. On YouTube, Keenan says thread pool waits. Let's talk. Sure, go to brennosr.com and type in the search thread pool, and I've got lots of blog posts. I've even got training class videos on it, so I go into total detail. I do demos showing the thread pool weights. The class that I do that in is my mastering server tuning class, where we spend about an hour on thread pool, digging down into detail. Those of you who love the streams would love the training classes too as well. So click training up at the top of brennosr.com, and you can see the mastering server tuning class where I go into that one. Myresh says, what's your opinion on using entity framework in creating the database and not just consuming it? I'm with Richie here in that I don't like it either, only because the defaults inside Entity Framework don't make a lot of sense when you look in at SQL Server. For example, they use nvarchar for everything where it's probably not appropriate, and they'll use larger data types than what I would normally find appropriate. So I'm a huge fan of Entity Framework, but not really so much of doing things like code first that create the database for you with very questionable data types. And they'll come back to haunt you when you try to scale. Razchek says, are race conditions always a problem when enabling RCSI? No, you may not have code that's vulnerable to race conditions. Not all code is vulnerable to race conditions. Usually when I'm explaining RCSI to someone, I explain the pattern of select a row and then do something with that row. And then immediately people are like, oh yeah, we do that a lot. We do it in the queuing stored procedure. And then I'm like, okay, RCSI isn't going to work here until we rewrite that stored procedure. But usually that's also why when I'm doing consulting, I need the lead architects in the room so that as I explain design patterns, they can immediately know, yes, we use that here, or no, we don't use that here. And then the last last question, Kevin DBA says, could you point out which master class talks about unique identifier as PK? That is mastering index tuning. So if you go into mastering index tuning and watch on day 3 in the H part of the death method, heaps usually need clustered indexes. We go into there about the drawbacks of heaps, where they make sense, where they don't make sense. And then when you need to create clustered indexes on them, I talk about how you use the Sunny strategies inside there. So that's mastering index tuning in the H part of the death method. So that is everything for today, I want to give one last shout out to Quest. So brentozar.com/go/optimization. You can download a totally free ebook on how to do query performance tuning. With that, now I'm going to go off. Oh, good, Burr or Kurt, we're up to 14 votes now. With that, I'm going to go off and work on my weekend client. So go work on tackling their performance emergency, writing up their findings for that. So, thanks everybody for hanging out with me, and I will see y'all next weekend. Adios, everybody.